Hello there, lovely folks of YouTube. Ren here. I am trying to film this in between storms. We've had storms yesterday, storms today, storms tomorrow. We have a brief respite here that I'm taking advantage of. It's not bad outside. It's only 83, but with the humidity being like about 80%, it feels like it's in the 90s. So we're a little moist. But I wanted to talk about this little plant right here. A lot of you may recognize this plant. This is a very commonly grown culinary herb. This is sage, Salvia officinalis, also known as common sage, garden sage, culinary sage. This is obviously part of the Salvia genus, which is massive, massive genus. There's over hundreds of species in the Salvia genus, many of which are known as sages, but this one specifically is the culinary sage, Salvia officinalis, which is considered to be the type for that genus. Now, this is not the sage that is used in North American native practices. So when you buy those smudge bundles at like frickin' Five Below and shit like that, this is not the sage that's in them. That sage is either Salvia apiana, which is white sage, or sometimes it's sage brush, which is actually in the Artemisia family. Both of those are used in indigenous practices. I don't like using them because it's not part of my particular culture set. And also a lot of those are harvested in ways that are really, really damaging to the environment. So this is the sage that I use instead, because this is culinary sage. It's originally native to Europe, the Mediterranean specifically, and it is part of the European culture set, which are the magical practices that I primarily focus on. So this particular plant, garden sage, is a perennial subshrub. So what that means is that it is mostly an herb, but it does create a woody stem. If you let it get old enough, it will, if it lives long enough. Usually grows to about 2 feet tall with a similar spread. Being from the Mediterranean region, like your hyssop, your lavender, your rosemary, it likes a well-draining soil and a lot of sun. So that's why I have this plant in a pot along with my hyssop, my lavender, my rosemary, because those plants do not like wet feet, and I have a really heavy clay soil that makes their feet really wet and holds on to water. They don't like that, so they get a pot instead. They might like it much better in the pot. So, now, as I mentioned, this is a perennial subshrub, but it can sometimes be short-lived. Sometimes the plants only live to be about 2 to 5 years old. So if you have a sage that lives more than 5 years, congratulations, you kind of lucked out. If your sage only lives 3 to 4 years, I mean, you didn't do anything wrong. It's just sometimes the plants just peter out after that. So, 2 ways to grow this plant. Now, of course, I just bought mine from the nursery because that's the easiest way to do it. You can grow it from seed, however, or you can do the propagation from the stem cutting. So you would just take one of these little soft stems, take most of the leaves off of it, and then root the stem. Either way can work, but again, this is a very common plant, very easy to get. I think this plant, I got a flat of 4 of these plants for like $2. So if you look in the right place, you can get it for really inexpensive. So let's take a little closer look at this plant so you can get a more detailed look at what it looks like. All right, so here we are looking at it close up. So you can see these like ovate, very textured, gray-green, kind of soft leaves are very distinct of the species. Now, there are a lot of varieties of sage that might not necessarily look like this one. This one is just a standard. I don't think I got any specific cultivar with this one. But there are other cultivars that will make bigger leaves, that will make smaller leaves, that will make variegated leaves, that will make curly leaves. Like, there's a whole lot of different varieties of sage. So this is just, like I said, the basic standard cultivar, but they can have a lot of different appearances, and there's a lot of showy ones as well. Generally, the showier ones tend to not be as good a flavor for culinary uses. Because again, they're bred more for looks than for taste. So if you are looking to use it for culinary uses, putting it in foods, then you might want to, you know, err on the side of getting one of the basic cultivars rather than one of the fancy looking ones. So Now, to harvest this plant, you're basically going to just trim back these stems. And just like a lot of other plants in that, the Lamiaceae family, which this is in, those mint family plants, once you cut back the stem, those little substems out there will grow basically 2 new branches where the 1 branch was. So I would basically I might harvest it there, or maybe like right here. I'd probably cut it right here to harvest it. And just harvest that top, and then what's left will grow and fill in and be even more shrubby. Once the plant is pretty well established, you can do a regular harvesting like that, every few weeks. Basically, whenever the plant gets big enough that it looks like it has enough branches that you can start pulling branches off, then that's when you can harvest it. Now, of course, the leaves are the primary part that's used in cooking. Usually use dried, but you can use them fresh as well. Sauteing fresh sage leaves in butter and then just making that sage butter and topping it on pasta is delicious. Delicious. So that's an option there. But of course, if you were going to dry it, you would dry it just like any other herb in a cool, dry place and then store it. These little stems, a lot of the time after the plant has dried, I'll take the leaves off and use the stems for things that are not necessarily like cooking culinary use, but you can use them in teas, you can use them in incense blends, you can use them in, smoke bundles, a lot of different uses for that. Basically anything that you might not want to use the leaves in, you can use the stems for. Anything that's non-edible, stems are great for that. Now, as you can see, I did have some little minor pest here that was going after the sage. I'm not sure exactly what it was, but pest problems with this one are usually fairly minimal. I have put absolutely nothing as far as pesticides go on this plant, and it's just loving life and not really injured in any way. Alright, we're going to go back and we'll talk about some of the folklore and magic about this plant. So, this plant has a lot of history with the Romans. The Romans held this plant in very high regard. They saw this plant as being sacred to Jove or Jupiter. And the name of the plant, the genus name Salvia, actually comes from the Roman name, which was salvus is the root, which in Latin means safe, secure, or healthy. So this plant was very widely held as a healing tonic. All aspects of healing, body, mind, and spirit healing is what this plant would be used for. So especially this plant is good for sort of driving out the malady or negative energy, negativity that can be present alongside of an illness. That's what I would use this plant for primarily. There's an old adage, which is from the Italians, but probably came about originally from the Romans, which basically goes, why should a man die while sage grows in his garden? So this really strongly hints at its history as a cure-all and a promoter of longevity. Now, as I mentioned, the Romans held this plant sacred to Jupiter. It is generally considered to be under the dominion of the planet Jupiter, Jupiter energies, which of course Jupiter is mostly known for expansion, but also expansion and growth, but also rulership, sort of leadership is this quality. And in fact, one of the words that we use to describe the dominion of Jupiter is sagacious, meaning wise leadership, and that actually has the root for sage in it. So there's a lot of ties in between this plant and Jupiter, a lot. Now, this is also a really good mental tonic. So as I've mentioned, it's really good for sort of driving out negative energies. It's also good for driving out negative thought patterns. Again, sage is one of the words that we use to describe someone who's wise and learned and good at thinking things. So that really gives us a good clue as to what this plant is good for as well. Paul Bayrell used to use this plant widely for that. He actually, in which book was it? I think it's his Compendium of Herbal Magic. He gives a little chant that he used to use while drinking sage tea to kind of help clear out that negative thought patterns. And the chant that he used was, "Sage make green the winter rain, charm the demon from my brain," which I thought was really cool. I had to share that. So now, of course, we have a lot of that sort of like healing, mental aspects to it, but we can also see that as protective, because basically we're making a space uninhabitable to harmful energies. So in that respect, you can use this plant pretty much the same way that the white sage or sagebrush that the Native Americans use. You can use it in pretty similar way. So if you're looking for a good substitute, hyssop would be my number one, which is this guy right here. But if you're looking for a substitute for white sage, garden sage is really great and probably easier to find than hyssop, to be quite honest. So yeah, that way you can have all of the benefits of that kind of energetic clearing without worrying about cultural appropriation or doing harm to the environment, because you can grow this yourself very easily. I will be honest, like, sage has never really liked me. This is the best sage I've had since I've moved into this house. I'm really, really excited about this plant because sage and I don't know, there was just something about it. I could not grow it. Which may actually be because of another old adage regarding this plant. And it is said that sage in the garden will thrive or falter depending on the finances, the financial situation of the home in which it grows. And to be fair, like, this year our finances have been better than any of the years previously. So maybe that's why it's doing so well. So now, of course, that does tie in this plant with prosperity magic. So a lot of people do use this for prosperity magic as well. And with that Jupiter kind of, you know, I could see where that would come about. I feel like depending on the needs of your working, there are other herbs that might work better for prosperity magic. This definitely would not be like a get-rich-quick kind of plant. This is more like setting up a foundation for long-term growth kind of plant. But it can be used for that. So if you really need something for prosperity magic, sage will definitely work for that as well. And then, of course, there are some very obscure ties in with love magic. In particular, Maud Grieve gives an old folklore about how if you took 12 leaves from the sage plant and you dropped them out of your bedroom window at the stroke of midnight on an auspicious day. I think she gives St. Mark's Day, but other people have like mentioned other days, including Midsummer or St. John's Day, or, you know, St. Michael's Day, or, you know, basically a day that is auspicious in some way. Take the 12 leaves of the sage plant and you drop them out your window at midnight, with one leaf being dropped with every stroke, every chime of the clock, basically. So this, of course, goes back to the time when we actually had clocks that would chime the hour. That basically doing that would attract your future husband to your home. Only, obviously, it was intended for women, but, you know, some of us guys will want future husbands too. So, you know. But then, of course, that does also illustrate kind of an interesting tie-in with women's magic that this plant has, much like the rosemary over here. Both sage and rosemary are only said to thrive in the home where a woman is the one who holds the power, where the woman is the one who's in charge. So, and interestingly enough, rosemary is actually now a salvia as well. So they've done some genotyping on that plant and found out that it's in the same genus. So, but yeah, just an interesting little thing that ties in with some women's mysteries there. So. Anyway, I am looking at the sky. I'm looking to the west there, and it is starting to get rather dark. So I'm going to wrap this up here. I'm sure there's probably more I could say on this plant, but I'll have to save it for another time. Anyway, so that's all I have for you today. I hope this video finds you well, and I will see you again soon.